He's a producer, engineer, mixer, and of course, an entrepreneur. So what's really cool about Ben, he's a Temple alum, Fox alum, graduated in 2018 and studied entrepreneurship, just like a lot of us. He's also an ESA alum, so it's really cool, very inspiring and exciting to have an ESA alum in the house. He was the former vice president of ESA just a couple years ago.
Maybe more than a couple. But.
Maybe more than a couple, right. So since graduating, Ben has won 2 Grammy Awards and has been nominated for several more with his work with artists like Jasmine Sullivan, Pusha T, Lil Uzi Vert. He's also founder of After 5 Studios, which is a private studio complex right here in Philadelphia. So please welcome Ben Thomas.
Thank you guys for having me. It's always good to be back.
For sure.
And just see how different it is and just see how much the program has grown. I think that's like my favorite part.
For sure. We're happy to have you here today. Thank you for coming in. All right, so I guess we'll just get started with, all the way back here at Temple. When you started at Temple, you decided to study entrepreneurship. What made you gravitate towards entrepreneurship in the first place?
So, when I started at Temple, I was actually double majoring in marketing and finance. The first version of After 5 Studios was in my mom's basement when I was in high school, but at the same time, I kind of had a really strong interest in finance. Like I wanted to work on Wall Street, and I also had this interest in entrepreneurship because I'd started this studio, and then I came to the first ESA meeting of the year, and there was a student who was the president at the time. His name was Vinny. He asked me what my major was, and I was like, marketing. He was like, man, you should switch it to entrepreneurship, and I was like, all right, and I switched.
It's that simple, huh?
It was that simple, yeah.
Awesome. Well, probably a great thing you chose right?
It was a great idea, for sure.
For sure. So I know you said, that's how you got involved with ESA. You showed up to a meeting. Can you talk a little bit more about how you got involved with, ESA down the line there and then with the IEI in general?
Yeah, so after that first meeting, I continued to go. The program was a lot smaller than it is now. I mean, first off, the space that we were in is probably like a fourth of the size of this room, and that included like offices, classroom, everything. So it was just a lot smaller of a program, but as I continued to go throughout my 4 years here at Temple, positions opened up, and I ended up, becoming vice president my senior year, and then I ended up getting a scholarship through IEI. I think it was my junior year or senior year, and that covered a good amount of my tuition as well. So just from all that, I stayed really involved and active, and I think that's just kind of how the opportunity just came through at ESA as positions opened, as people graduated.
For sure. Now, if you don't mind bringing us back, what did ESA look like back when you were here? Like, what kind of events were we doing?
So when I was here, in a good year, we might have had 12 to 15 members. It was a very small program. At one point, we shared an office with a different SBO. We had some speaker events. I remember we planned kind of a whole entrepreneurship sort of day where we had a panel with a couple young, it was like a 30 under 30 entrepreneurship thing that we did where we had a couple young entrepreneurs speak. We brought in this founder of Saxby's one time. So it was a smaller program, but we still tried to provide as much value and do as many events as we could.
For sure. So thinking about your involvement with ESA and the IEI in general, your time here at Temple, experience with entrepreneurship, what are some different ways that showed up, both personally throughout your life since graduating, and then of course, professionally within your career? Yeah,
I made some great friends. One of my friends, Eli, he went to Temple. He's an entrepreneurship major. He's here right now. But I ended up starting my own business after school, well, kind of in school. Like I said, I still had the studio in my mom's basement at the time. But in 2020, we turned it into an actual studio and a commercial space and stuff. And a lot of the things that I learned in my classes here, I definitely use now that I am, running a business and having people work for me and whatnot.
For sure. Can you talk a little bit more about that studio in the basement, how you started that, how that all worked out?
Yeah, so I got my first kind of musical starts when I was super young. I started recording friends and whatnot in about 7th grade. And then fast forward to 11th grade, I went to a music camp over the summer called Grammy Camp. It's a camp run by the Recording Academy. And after that, I was like, I want to do this. And, shout out my mom. She's the best person ever. She let me and one of her friends turn the basement into a studio. So she had a friend who was a contractor. He would come in between jobs and on the weekends and stuff, and we built out a vocal booth and whatnot in the basement. And so I ran the studio in the basement for a couple years, even while I was still at Temple, I stayed on the 8th floor of Johnson my freshman year. And then I moved back home my sophomore year. I'm from Mount Airy. I moved back home my sophomore year and commuted here so that I could continue running the studio out of the basement.
So can you talk a little bit more, specifically like business plan type things for that studio underground? Did you like charge for people to use the studio? How did
Yep.
that business model work?
Yeah, so the thing about running a recording studio that I don't think a lot of people understand is people think it's a music business. It's not a music business. It's a hospitality business. It's closer akin to running like an Airbnb or running a hotel, right? You're selling space. You're not selling your ability to make music. You're selling a space to people. And so I always knew that, and I always tried to make sure that the space that I had was very comfortable and inviting. Even the current space that we have now, which wanted to make sure it was always very comfortable, very inviting. So always had like free snacks, free water and everything. In terms of charging, I remember, I think the first person I charged like $20 an hour. He came in, he recorded one song, and then he was like, yo, my girlfriend's coming to pick me up, and I never heard from him ever again. He never asked for the song. He like gave me like $40 or $60 in cash, and I never heard from him to this day. So I was like, maybe I did a bad job, but I don't know. But yeah, so I don't think I ever wrote like a formal business plan for it, but I don't really like to say the music industry. This is the music business, right? Like we're here to make money, and so from the beginning I was charging people. But not everybody, right? You have to understand like there's some artists that you have to believe in and that you can build with and you guys can grow together. But just for artists that I didn't necessarily believe in as much, we started at $20 an hour and then moved it up to 25. I think right now we do like between $65 and $75 an hour for sessions now. So just the slow growth and the progression to get the price up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that trajectory there is amazing. So I think that's a really interesting point you make about it being more of like a hospitality type thing than music business. I never really thought about it that way. So I'm sure between, everybody here, we have some people interested in hospitality. What advice would you have for people looking to work or, create something within the hospitality industry? Yeah,
like I said, you're selling space, right? We're not selling music. When people come to me and they're like, I want to be a producer, I want to be an engineer, should I build a studio? I'm like, no. You need to go work at somebody else's studio, or you just need to have a simple setup in your bedroom to focus on making music. But we're selling space and we're selling an experience. I think you just have to really understand what your market is. And I know that's what a lot of people say about their business, but for us, we know exactly who we are catering towards, right? So my current studio is specifically catered towards women of color, and people in the LGBTQ community, right? It didn't initially start like that, but that's kind of what it gravitated towards because we have a very welcoming and open environment. It's on the 3rd floor of a warehouse. There's windows, there's natural light. A lot of studios are, because of like soundproofing stuff, tend to be in basements and usually have like a lot of people hanging around, and that's not always a place where people who have traditionally been marginalized feel comfortable. And so my space is the exact opposite. And so because of that, we started to see what types of bookings we were getting, and we were like, okay, these are the types of people that consistently book here, so we need to shift our business plan in that direction. And so now, we have a lot of like queer events, and we host like listening parties and whatnot, and we just try to keep it as comfortable as possible because I understand what my market is. And if that means that certain rappers don't want to book because you can't smoke inside, I mean, that's fine. I'm not trying to be Apple. I'm not trying to sell to everybody. I know exactly what my market is. And so I'm trying to cater to those people, so then I build like a really loyal customer base rather than just trying to cater to everybody, and that's just never gonna happen.
For sure. So it kind of sounds like you found your niche, with After Five
sure.
Studios. Can you talk about like how you discovered that? Like what was that process of finding that niche?
Yeah, it kind of just, like I said, it just happened organically. We just saw what type of people were consistently booking. So one of the limitations of my studio is that you can't smoke inside, right? You can smoke outside, there's a balcony area, you can smoke in the parking lot, but you can't smoke inside. And that's like a big thing for recording studios, is to be able to smoke inside. So with not having the ability to smoke inside, I already knew that was gonna eliminate a lot of potential clients. And that's okay with me, right? Because it was really hard to find the space. I think I looked at over 50 spaces because a lot of people are very hesitant to allow somebody to like build a studio in their space. There's soundproofing concerns, traffic concerns, and whatnot. So when I found somebody that was willing to do that, if not smoking was the deal breaker, that's just how we were gonna have to roll with it. And so because of that, it, I think, catered the market in a certain way because the type of people that would want to smoke in their sessions are not going to come here, you know?
For sure. So kind of going into this next section here, if you will, I want to ask all of you, raise your hand if you've heard of any of this. You've ever seen any of this cover art here, right? Pretty much everyone. That's huge impact right there, right?
For sure, yeah.
Amazing.
No, true blessing.
For sure. I mean, you're working with Philly legends like Jasmine Sullivan, Uzi, Meek Mill. Can you talk to us, like, when you graduated, how did you start to, like, build your network so that you could eventually work with these major artists?
So some of that happened before graduation, right? So essentially, came to Temple in the fall of 2014. My freshman year was just your regular freshman year. Like I said, I was 8th floor. Anybody J&H or like was in J&H at some point? No? One person. All right, that works. So when I was here, a lot of these other dorms weren't here, right? So freshman year, or first semester freshman year, very regular college stuff. Second semester freshman year is when I think that my professional music career really started. That's when I met Dave from Rec Philly. That's right when they started. Right when they started Rec Philly, I met him in 2015. I ended up working with them. I mean, even still to this day. But I mean, I was the main engineer at their first space. I just helped design their new space. So I met Dave. I met this another person in Philly who's become a great friend of mine named Cho Moody. He's an artist and entrepreneur from the city. He raps, but he also has his own beer and wine. And we recently just executive produced an album for the Eagles. They played, they played songs at every home game this year. But I met a lot of people in the music community in Philadelphia around 2015-ish. Cho introduced me to this guy named Ant Bell. He's a producer, songwriter. He owned a studio downtown, and he allowed me to come intern at his studio. And so something that really helped me was the fact that I had been working kind of with some friends and some clients in my basement, where a lot of people don't start interning at studios until after graduation. I started freshman year. And then I was interning there for about 5 or 6 months. I was also, at the same time, like I had mentioned earlier, I didn't know if I wanted to do music or if I wanted to do like finance. So I was interning at the studio, but I was also interning at this wealth management company downtown called First Trust Financial Resources. So I don't recommend this, but there were some days where I would go to class early, like 9 to 2 or 3. I would take the train downtown to Center City, work at my internship there from like 3 to 7, take the train back up here, take the train back up here. This is back when after I left my mom's house, I moved in the area. Come back up here, change clothes, go to the studio on Spring Garden from like 8 p.m. to 5 in the morning. And I did that for like 6 months, almost every day, right? Interning at the studio. A lot of times your studio internship ends, everybody has kind of the same story where a known client books, they call a bunch of people, ask them if they can be the engineer, people say no, you get the call. So that happened for me in, I think it was end of 2015, maybe beginning of 2016 with Ty Dolla $ign, session went well. So now I'm not interning there, now I'm like working there, they're giving me sessions, I'm making a little bit of money. And then same person, Ant Bell, he called me one day. He was like, yo, what are you doing? I was like, I'm not really doing anything. He was like, yo, I bought Jasmine Sullivan a computer, I bought her a microphone, I bought her speakers. Can you go to her house, set it up, show her how to use it, show her how to record herself? And I was like, of course, I've never met a famous person before. Why not, right? And I think a lot of times in your career, you have these opportunities to do what you've been told, or you have opportunities like take a risk. So I go to her house, I set this stuff up, and I just get this idea that she's not going to record herself. She was not paying me any attention. And so I just took a risk, and I was like, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I just lied to her, and I was like, oh, I don't do anything other than go to school, but like I have these 2 other internships and all this stuff. I was like, if you wanna record, just call me and I'll come back. And she kind of just like brushed me off. I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks, and then she just started calling, and that's how, at this point, it's like 2015, so I worked with Jasmine all throughout college, so it just kind of, the thing about the music industry is it's a relationship-based business, right? And so as long as you are, because I was not very good at my job at that point, right? I was cool and I was young and willing to show up for free, and that's just how that happened. And then some songs started getting released with Jasmine, and then just started working with other people in Philly. Rec Philly started growing, so I'm working with them, and then just building just building those relationships, and then you work with one artist and it leads to another one and leads to another one and whatnot.
For sure. So, funny enough, we actually had Dave Silver come in and speak for us last semester.
Yeah. And we brought Dave in 2016, I think.
Oh, funny. All right, yeah. So, I know a lot of us are familiar with Rec. I myself intern at Rec, some other interns here at Rec. Could you talk about your experience with Rec Philly and then how that showed up in your career?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I met Dave and Will at their first, so they used to have a company called Broad Street Music Group when Dave went to Temple, where they would like throw shows, but when they transitioned that to Rec Philly, I went to their first town hall meeting at this co-working space that's not around anymore called Venture Forth. So I went to their first town hall meeting because I had heard that one of them went to Temple. I didn't know if it was Will or Dave, but I heard one of them went to Temple and had graduated at this point it's 2015, and Dave graduated in 2013, so it's relatively recently. And so I just went up to them and just was like, yo, I make songs in my mom's basement. And they were like, oh, cool. And then it just started from there. And I remember Will and there was this other guy that used to work there who unfortunately passed away named Tim. And then some of their artists that they would work with, they would just like come to my mom's basement, and Will and Tim would be on the computer doing businessy stuff, and we're like making songs, and it just started to grow with them there. And then they got the Window Factory space on 9th and Diamond, and so I was the main engineer there for a couple years. And then it was like one of the first times I consistently was making money through music, was having this opportunity to like work with some of their early members, just like kind of being the engineer. When somebody wanted to record, they'd call me and I would walk over there after class or in between classes and stuff. And then when it was time, I kind of fell back from that a little bit as I started kind of freelancing more and kind of doing my own thing. And then when it was time and they got the new space that they currently have downtown, David approached me and he was like, we're doing a sponsorship deal with Yamaha. They want to give us all this equipment, but I don't know what any of this is. Can you come to the meeting? And that kind of just progressed into me helping design the space and picking out all the equipment in all the rooms and whatnot. It's been a solid relationship at this point for, I think, almost 8 years, that I've known those guys.
That's awesome. So kind of getting back to the discography side of things, this right here is just a small selection or snippet, if you will, of your discography, right? So if anybody's interested, you could check out Ben's website, has his full discography listed out on here.
Wow.
But we gotta know, of all these artists that you've worked with, all these projects that you worked on, who's your favorite artist that you've worked with?
Yeah.
And what's your favorite project?
So my favorite people to work with will always be my friends, right? Getting to work with these big artists it's great and it's a true blessing. But getting to work with people that you saw from the beginning to now, those are the real blessings. So whether it's like I said, my friend Chill Moody, I've known him for almost 10 years at this point. Armani White, you guys probably know him from like that Billie Eilish song. So I've known Armani since when he had 3,000 followers on Instagram, right? He's a great friend of mine as well. But my favorite project and favorite artist will always be, there's this artist, her name was Deja. She went to UArts, graduated in 2018, just like me. We met freshman year. And we met through a mutual friend, and we made some music together, and we kind of really just connected. Some of the best songs that I had written and produced were with her. We started getting some early traction on Spotify in like 2015, when it was really, really hard to even get songs on Spotify and whatnot. But unfortunately, she passed away from small intestine cancer on Christmas Day in 2019. So she's favorite person I've ever worked with, the only person that I get the question often of like, who would you want to work with? I try to not even think about that because, I never thought I would be working with Uzi. I never thought I'd be working with Meek. Like all these opportunities just were kind of random. So I try not to box myself in by being like, I have to work with this person because you could block your blessings. But I would give up every single song on there to do another song with her. That's the most important.
That's a great story for sure. And I'm sorry for your loss.
No, I appreciate that.
So, thinking about working with all these major artists, something we talk about here in ESA is the imposter syndrome, right? So like, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe my business isn't good enough to put out into the world, or my product, service, whatever it might be. How did you become confident in yourself and your skills to work in high pressure situations like, with Uzi, Meek, people like that?
I mean, who said I still don't feel that? We all feel it. I even talked to some of my other engineering peers who are 10 times more successful than I am, and they still send a song out to somebody and are like, oh man, are they gonna hate it? It just comes with the territory. I think for me, something that's helped me is I treat every single session exactly the same, right? So I give the same amount of effort, I use the same template, I use the same equipment, whether it's Uzi or it's, wannabe rapper from Philly who's trying to sound like Uzi, right? Because I think if you try to turn it on and turn it off, right? If you're like, I'm gonna put in more effort and more energy when it comes to like the big name people and I'm gonna kind of just like coast with the smaller sessions, the day is gonna come where you're gonna flip the light switch and nothing's gonna happen, right? And now you look crazy because you're in a situation where you need to perform your best and you can't do it because you have had this kind of like, I'm gonna coast sometimes and I'm not gonna coast. You never know, like I had just mentioned, I've known Armani since he had like 2,000 or 3,000 followers on Instagram, He used to make songs in my apartment when I was still at Temple and now he's, has one of the biggest songs of the year, right? So if I had treated him like somebody who I didn't believe in or treated him less than, then we still wouldn't have the relationship that we have now that he's become successful, So I think the best thing that you can do to try to fight the imposter syndrome, especially in kind of like a client services, because like I said, my studio is a hospitality business, but what I do personally, that's a client service business, right? Is you have to treat everybody like they're Beyonce, right? Like you have to treat every person with respect. You have to show up to every session and try to do your best because you never know who so-and-so is gonna be. And that's the best way that I can fight the imposter syndrome because at the end of the day, right, like no matter who's on the other side of the glass, I'm gonna still press Command Spacebar to start recording. I'm still gonna use the same template. I'm still gonna be the same engineer, and that's how you can kind of, at the end of the day, like when you start working with bigger artists, something that you'll notice is when you're working with smaller artists, they value somebody who is kind of a jack of all trades, right? Like you can come into a session and be like, yo, I can record your song, mix your song, and I can shoot your videos, and I can take pictures for you and help you come up with marketing strategies. As you get higher up, everybody becomes specialized, right? All I do for Uzi is record and manage his files, right? I don't have any say in the live show. I don't have any say in the videos, the rollout plan. I don't make the beats. I pick the beats, but I don't make them, right? All I do is record the songs, mix them, and manage the files because he has the opportunity to have the best people do all of that stuff, right? So you'll have to understand that, like, if he's still calling me every day and it's literally been 3 years, then I must be okay at what I'm doing because he could replace me with somebody at the top level, right? But he's consistently calling me. And so that has something to do with the personal relationship we have now, but that wouldn't happen if the skill level wasn't there, right? And so that's how you have to believe in yourself. You have to understand that, like, when you're working with celebrities, they have the access to replace you. So clearly that's saying something positive about your skill level if you have not been replaced.
For sure. So kind of thinking about, obviously you chose to follow your passion, right? At first it was thinking about maybe finance, and then obviously, your true passion lies in music. You decided to pursue that. Something I think that resonates with a lot of people here, myself included, is kind of trying to walk that line of like, do I want to pursue my passion or do I want to pursue what's going to make me money type thing, in a career? So what advice do you have for walking that line and choosing to follow your passion?
A couple of things, right? So first thing is you have to understand you don't necessarily want to follow your passion. You want to follow what you're good at. Because if you're good at something, then you'll become passionate at it, right? Like if you just have passion and you don't have the skill set and you don't have the ability to develop, like I love basketball. Honestly, I love basketball more than I love music, right? But like, I'm not making it to the NBA, guys. Like, it just is what it is, right? I still love basketball. I've always loved basketball. I watch basketball every day. I read books about basketball. I watch videos of people talking about basketball, right? I have passion for it, but I think there have been NBA players who are about my height, but the amount of work that I would have to have done to do that is just not feasible, right? So passion is clearly not enough, right? So I followed my skill set. I had been developing this skill set for years at this point, right? So the passion has grown as I've gotten better, It's like any skill. As you get better at playing the guitar or at drawing, you want to draw more because you are better at it, right? So I think what makes more sense than following your passion is follow your skills and you will become passionate about them. In terms of the money thing, right? It's hard, right? So when I was at Temple, I was in this national program called MLT. It stands for Management Leadership for Tomorrow. Essentially, they take the top 200 to 300 Black and Latino business students from all around the world. All around the country, and it's an internship and entry-level job acceleration program, right? So like I got to interview at Google. I got job offers from like Deloitte, Morgan Stanley, like all this stuff through this program, right? I met students from every college. I mean, there was kids there from Harvard, from Penn, like they all were getting the fancy jobs, the fancy finance jobs, the fancy consulting jobs, all that stuff, right? I chose to turn down a job offer from Deloitte in DC. That's why I interned there before senior year. I turned it down, y'all, right? Like, if I remember correctly, the offer was $72,500 starting with a $13,000 signing bonus, right? I did not cash the check when they mailed it to me. So like, I took the job, but I deferred the start date for like 8 months. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna graduate. I'm gonna see if I can make this music thing happen, right? I have a check for $13,000. I'm making like no money doing music, right? I have this like cheap apartment. This is before I built my studio. I wasn't in my mom's house anymore. I had this like cheap $200 studio that was like smaller than the ESA office, right? And it was really hard because I knew all these other students who were like having all these fancy jobs, making $80, $90, $100,000 out of school, right? And I'm seeing them on Instagram, like living their best life. And I unfollowed almost every single person from the program that I was in on Instagram because it was messing with my mental, because I was like, I could have had that life and I chose to like struggle and try to make this music thing work. And watching other people live the life that I could have been living when I'm trying to like follow something and build something for myself, it was throwing off my mental. So I unfollowed all of them and I just kept grinding and kept going down the path that I believed in, because I was like, those corporate opportunities will be there forever, right? But this music thing is finite. These connections that I've made, whether it's like Jasmine and other people that I've worked with around that time, like I need to capitalize on this in this moment. And I just kept pushing, and I was like, all right, it's gonna take a little bit, and then it worked out, and now I've been able to like become financially successful for myself and build a studio and pay people and whatnot. But you have to kind of focus in and on yourself, and if this is what you want to do, you have to get the noise out of the way. And that's why I unfollowed everybody, and I got the noise out the way so I could focus on the journey.
For sure. That's great answer. So thinking about your success story, I guess you're working with Jasmine Sullivan, you're working with all these artists, you find out you're Grammy nominated. What was that moment like?
Yeah, it was a true blessing, right? So the Recording Academy has been a central part of my career from the beginning, right? Like I told you earlier, the first music camp I went to was Grammy Camp, put on by the Recording Academy. When I was at Temple, I was a campus ambassador for them. Then after that, I became like a voting member. I then became, because somebody stepped down, I became, if not the youngest, one of the youngest. So there's 12 chapters. Each chapter has a board. There's a chapter in Philadelphia. I was a governor of the chapter in Philadelphia when I was 23. So I'm pretty sure I'm like the youngest person to ever do that. So it's been very central to my whole career. And so getting nominated had extra meaning because of the value that the Recording Academy had provided for me. It was a blessing. I was at lunch with a friend and watching the nomination show on my phone, found out, I called my mom. It was a blessing, it's it was great.
Yeah, I mean that's a moment you'll never forget. That's amazing. So can you talk a little bit more about, you kind of touched on it already, but the behind the scenes work there to become a Grammy nominated artist?
Yeah. So I don't remember who told me this, but it really resonates with me, right? And it's this idea of like, if you want an extraordinary life, you have to be willing to put in an extraordinary amount of work, right? So if I think about myself, having a full-time job with an artist, as their main like recording and mixing engineer, there's maybe 50 to 60 people in the world that have a job like I have, right? Because there's not a lot of artists who sell enough music to have the budget to pay for me. I mean, I promise you I work more than anybody you know, right? Like I work 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. 7 days a week. The only days I don't work are holidays. I have not been to sleep. Last time I went to sleep was at 4 p.m. yesterday. So like, was up, had to do some other work, went to the studio from 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning, walked to Penn Station by 7, caught a train, got here at 9, and then now I'm here, right? So if you want an extraordinary life, you have to be willing to put in an extraordinary amount of work, right? There's no way around it. There's no shortcuts. Like people say, oh, like work smarter, not harder. Like no, you have to work smart and hard, right? Because like If you want to compete with somebody like me, right, I have 10 years worth of skills and I can outwork you. So how are you going to compete with me if I can outwork you and I have 10 years worth of skills and 10 years worth of a resume, right? So that's what it is. You have to be willing to put in the work. There's no way around it. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm not here to lie to y'all. Like, you have to just do the work. You have to put in the hours. You have to make the sacrifices. And then you can kind of start to see, okay, I need to work with this person, not that person. I need to link up with this manager, not that manager. This person's good for my career. That person's not good for my career. But the work ethic and the skill level is like your ticket in. Once you get into the inner circle of the music industry or the entertainment industry or finance or whatever, once you cash in your hard work ticket to get into that inner circle, whatever industry it is, then you can start to kind of move strategically and you can start to, use relationships and connections. But if you don't have the work ethic and you're not willing to do it, I mean, I don't really know what else to tell you. For
sure. So what other advice do you have for any of our friends out here trying to make it within the music industry?
Same thing I just said, man. This is a relationship game and a work ethic game, right? Something I'll say is you can't compare yourself to other people, right? I like to think of two different artists, right? So everybody knows Justin Bieber, right? And everybody knows 2 Chainz, right? Yeah? Okay. So 2 Chainz and Justin Bieber are both multi-millionaires off of music, right? And some people's careers will be, and not just in music, just in anything, some people's careers will be like Justin Bieber, right? Justin Bieber got discovered on YouTube when he was 12 years old, and he has essentially been famous, super famous, since 2007. There's not a lot of people that have continuously been famous like that from the time they were 12 to I think he's almost 30 now, right? And that's just some people's journey. But then some people are like 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz has been making music since he was probably 12 or 13, and he didn't get his first break, big break, until 2012. At that point, he was 37, right? But he's still an incredibly successful rapper. He has the show on GQ. His kids, grandkids, great-grandkids are set up for life, right? He's not as successful as Justin Bieber, but you wouldn't say he's not a successful rapper, but it took him until he was 38, right? Some people get successful early, some people get lucky early, some people, it takes longer, right? And you have to walk your journey, and that just comes with that consistency and that work ethic, right? You want to make sure that you're putting in the work so that when the opportunities come, you can see them and you can be ready for them, right? I started working with Uzi at the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020, right? I was not ready in January of 2020. I was not ready in January 2019. I was not ready in January 2018. I had not done enough work. But because I had done enough work, that when the opportunity came, I felt prepared for it, right? That's why having that consistency and that work ethic is important in anything, not just in music, right? The only way to get better at something is consistent, deliberate, intentional practice, right? That's what I had been doing before. Uzi and I have made over 1,000 songs in the past 3 years, right? Before him, I had already made probably 2,000 songs with other people. So I had put in the practice, and it was consistent, it was deliberate, and it was intentional. And there was feedback, right? I'm making songs with people, they're giving me feedback on my skills. And so that's how I was able to spot the opportunities. So if you're an aspiring artist, I have a friend, he's an artist from Philly, his name is XG. His manager, who's also kind of my manager, and my attorney, his name's Jason. At the beginning of 2021, Jason challenged XG to make 500 songs that year. And he did it. And the opportunities that he got were exponential from where he was because he had been putting in the work, he'd been getting better. So when people were calling about shows and calling, to release his songs and stuff, he had gotten so much better because he had put in that practice so that when the opportunities came, he was ready. So I think that's what it comes down to. Just put in the work, put in the practice, so when the opportunities come, you're ready for them. Because they will come. If you're a good person and you're kind of in the right spaces, the opportunities will come. They'll come consistently, but you have to be ready for them, and that comes in from the practice and the work ethic.
All right, so jumping into our last section here, After 5 Studios, right? Can you tell us more about that founding story? Started in the basement, and now it's a legitimate, studio complex.
Started in my mom's basement in 2012, 2013. Ran the studio in my mom's basement. Like I said, she's the greatest person ever. She was letting all types of questionable people come in and out of her house. all times of the day and night. Did that until my mom sold her house in 2016. Moved around Temple. Had a 2-bedroom apartment that was super cheap. Turned one room into a studio because it was like I had two options. It was like get a roommate or figure out how to make that room make you how much that roommate would pay. So that's what I did, right? Had a studio in the crib. Somebody bought the house when around graduation, doubled the rent. I was like, we're not doing this. Moved to a tiny studio apartment on Spring Garden. Had another tiny, I'm talking like, y'all see this blue square? This is how big my studio was, right? Like it was tiny, it was a closet. But it was $200 a month, it was mine. I was able to work there. And this is how I was able to develop some really dope relationships with some artists because I was able to give them free studio time because it was only costing me $200 a month. Pandemic happens, I realized that this small space, there was a lot of problems with it. It just wasn't gonna work anymore. Found this space in Kensington that was somebody else's studio. Got one room, then I got the other room. So we built it out into a studio. Then another room next to it became available. We grabbed that, we turned that into a podcast studio where rather than charging people, we become partners in the podcast. We produce the podcast for them, audio and visual, and then we split kind of the advertising and whatnot. And then now we just recently got another room that we are building out into our second music studio, and it's also gonna be a photography and videography space as well. This never was my intention. My intention was to just build a place for me to work. But because of my work schedule with Uzi, we ended up doing a lot of traveling all across the US. And so I just had this space. And so I was like, we might as well turn it into a business. Hired some friends that I knew that were engineers. And yeah, now we just kind of run it. We do sessions, we do events, we do podcasts, we do a little bit of everything.
Sweet. So one more question from me, and then we're going to open it up to our audience. So make sure you guys have some questions prepared. So what's next for Ben Thomas? What's next for your music career, After 5 Studios? What's coming up?
Right now, the main focus of the studio is getting this new room done, and we are trying to hire some new engineers. Hiring is honestly the hardest part of running a business. Just hiring good people, it's very difficult. So that's what's next for the studio, just continuing to build it out, bring some new people in. What's next for me? I'm not sure yet. A lot of things up in the air, just continuing to kind of decide what direction I want to take my career in, kind of coming to a crossroads about where I want to go to next, and just kind of picking a path and sticking to it.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate you. Can we get some noise for Ben Thomas? All right, now my friend Drew over here has a mic. He's gonna pass that around to anybody that has a question. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and Drew will bring you the mic.
Oh wait, what's your name?
Christian.
Christian.
So something I find really cool is like seeing like a celebrity or like someone who's like really popular in a zone where they're not on camera or they're like not on film or they're not on their phone all the time or their life isn't being broadcasted to the internet. So what's it like meeting these big artists who are you see them all the time on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, whatever it may be, and how does it compare to the way that they are in their natural environment?
Yeah.
That frustrating.
I've been blessed that I only ever meet them in their like natural environment, right? I don't see the celebrity part that much. Like, even though, I've been working with Uzi for years, like we don't really hang out outside of work. Like I don't like go to the club with him or like, that's because that's not that I'm not welcome, I am, that's just not my life. That's not things that I'm interested in. So I really only see people in kind of their natural environment. And the whole thing is just like, don't treat them weird because they just wanted to be treated normal. We're building up a level of trust. So I don't really know. I mean, most people, just not just celebrities, just people in general are just like remarkably consistent. So the same kind of extra personality that you see on the internet is the same thing that I see every night in the studio.
How's it going?
Yep.
My name's Caleb Rush. Your story's awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Never heard of you before this. I'm not huge into music, but it's really cool to listen to you in person. One question I had, when it comes to like, I mean, you've developed a lot professionally over the years, which is really cool to see. What about self-growth? Is there any advice you have on that and kind of breaking that up between, networking, professionally developing yourself, and then that self-growth, which is
Yeah, I love self-growth. I'm constantly working on myself. Something that has always worked for me is I like structured discipline just for no reason, right? Like in 2021, like I'm very much a moderate social drinker, right? Like I don't have a problem with it. I'm not a big fan of alcohol. I didn't have a sip of alcohol until I turned 21. You know, I'll have a drink here and there and stuff. But in the beginning of 2021, I was like, you know what? I'm done. And I didn't drink for the rest of the year. Like just to give myself that structure and that discipline, right? Like I try to go to the, so one of the problems with the music industry is like I work at night, so my sleep schedule is just destroyed. So I try to manage the other parts of my health, right? I go to the gym almost every day. I cook almost all the meals that I eat, like I meal prep and stuff, like just to try to take care of my body, since I know that the sleep thing I can't really do anything about in this phase of my life. So it's just about, like I said, I like to put just little ways to discipline myself in, whether that's like, okay, I'm not gonna drink alcohol for this year, or I'm gonna cut back on the sweets, or I'm gonna cut back on the socials, just not because there's a problem, just because I think having discipline and just consistently doing it, it helps you so that when you need to do it, the muscle is already kind of being built, right? But other things in terms of self-growth, like I love to read, I try to read every day, reading different types of books, because most of like the big problems in life, people have been asking questions about forever, right? Like we're asking questions now about like AI and stuff like that, right? Those are new questions, you know, there's not a lot of books on that. But like the big questions, like how do I live a meaningful life? Like how do I find my purpose? Like what is the point of all of this, right? People have been asking those questions for thousands of years, and there's so many books about that, so you can start to hear kind of what other people think about those questions, and I think that's a really great way to kind of develop yourself.
Absolutely. So I think we got time for one more question from the audience.
Hi, I'm Joe. We met.
Yep.
I feel like as an upperclassman, this period of limbo or transitional period into the professional world seems a little scary, or you get a little lost in translation. Do you have any tips for someone who's, in front of opportunity, trying to capitalize on the most that they can
Yeah.
in their professional life?
Same thing I said earlier, don't follow your passion, follow your skills. It will be so much easier that way. So whatever you're good at, and not only like good at currently, like something that you enjoy developing that skill, follow that, and the passion will follow, and the opportunities will come, and they'll be a lot easier to take advantage of. So whatever skill you currently have that you already are starting to develop, and you enjoy the process of getting better at it, go that path, and you'll have the most success if you go that path, and you'll be the happiest.
All right, so that's all the time we have for questions, unfortunately. Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's really cool to have a former ESA member here today. Really inspiring to see someone, achieve such great success. So thanks for coming in. Can we get one more round of applause for Ben Thomas? All right, so a couple last announcements for our members here. We have our suitable code up here at the front, Venmo for dues, and if you haven't joined our GroupMe for our members, you can scan that QR code and join that to communicate with us. If you're new here, thank you for coming. If you're returning, of course, thanks for coming in. Always appreciate you. If you're interested in getting involved with ESA, come talk to me or any of the other board members. We have a membership application here up at the front. We're going to have a lot of cool events just like this throughout the semester, so we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for coming out today.
Sweet. Good? For sure.
Yeah,
Thanks.
man.